Not seeing anything out of place, they left.
We heard them break into the shop, and that's when he really threatened me and told me to be quiet, and if I made a sound, he would kill me. And he had his hands on my mouth and his hand around my throat, and I was scared. I didn't know who was upstairs or if they were going to find us or anything, and when they left, it was like my whole world fell down. But they came back.
Hay's wife had placed another frantic call to police.
We got a call from the dispatcher saying that Mrs. Hay had found her husband and she believed that he was dead. We ran back down the driveway and through the side door into the garage there. At that time, Donald Hay had come out of the hole, as we call it, and was scrambling up onto one of the counters. At that time, we didn't know what he was doing, but Paul and I raced over, grabbed him, dragged him down, and placed him in handcuffs.
All I could think of was just put my clothes on and try and go out. And I did that. I climbed up. That's probably one of the least clear memories I have, because I just didn't realize that it was actually finally over. I kept expecting something to happen to say, sorry, you're still not getting free. And then when I saw the police, I just started to cry.
It was midnight, and I just crawled into bed, and the doorbell rang. And I got up, and I turned the hall light on, and I could see these two people standing in front of the door, and I knew that's when I was going to hear. And I froze at the top of the stairs. I could not go down to answer the door. I was just absolutely frozen. And finally, I thought, I have to go down and answer that door, and I went down, and I answered the door, and I opened it, and before I could say anything, they said, we found her, but she's alive. And then I started screaming.
Abby was already on her way to the hospital. It was there that somebody noticed her hand and the number 177 on it. She'd lost 4 days. She'd been Don Hay's captive for 181 days.
We took off up the hill, doing over 100 miles an hour.
It didn't take Ruth Drover very long to get to the hospital to see her little girl.
She was so thin. She was just like a walking skeleton. She was dirty. She was so filthy. She hadn't been washed for 6 months. She smelt.
What'd you do?
I just hugged her and cried and kissed her and held her, and all she kept saying was, Mommy, 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 Mommy.
That's all she could say?
Yeah. But she was so weak, she couldn't stand up.
I was in shock. I know, it was finally over, but it didn't hit me until quite some time later. Not that evening, not the next day. It was quite some time later when I realized, fully realized that it was over, that I was free.
Police officials say Abby Drover is in reasonably good health, though she has some difficulty walking.
Abby's 181 days of horror were beyond anyone's comprehension. The world was talking about Abby Drover, wondering how she survived, but Abby didn't say much beyond her statements to police.
Do you remember how you felt as the police were there?
Relieved. Like a load came off my shoulders like you wouldn't believe. Once I sobered up and realized just what I had done, like how horrific it had to be for her, yeah, I was suicidal. I didn't want to live. I didn't feel I should live. I didn't think I was fit to live.
Don Hay pleaded guilty to kidnapping and to having sex with someone under 14. He was sentenced to life, but with parole eligibility after just 7 years. He's never made full parole, but he has had 150 passes from prison in the past decade, and he spent many happy hours with his friends and their families.
I see
a man that has shown significant change, a man that's deserving of freedom to go on with his life. He's a caring, sensitive, responsible individual.
Scripturally, if we say an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, he's certainly given a whole lot of teeth.
He's got people here that want him, that love him, that will back him. We've proved that we'll back him.
Don Hay has dozens of friends and supporters. They all say he deserves another chance.
My friends are very special to me now.
Don Hay's friends say he won't reoffend, and on the 150 passes he's had from prison, they've opened their homes and their hearts to him.
He always calls Sherry his princess.
They just jump into his arms, and they all call him Uncle Don.
We're dating back about 8-10 years ago. He was at my daughter Allison's baptism.
They all say they have no trouble trusting him. But Don Hay hasn't always had friends. When he was first sentenced for his crime 21 years ago, he thought he'd be alone for the rest of his life.
I didn't think anybody would want to talk to me after what I did.
He was right at first. But Hay began treatment for his alcoholism and for his sexual deviancy.
I said, okay, I've given myself 7 years to change my life around, to jump through the hoops and do whatever people feel necessary.
Hay was eligible for parole after serving just 7 years of his life sentence.
I felt I was ready.
But the National Parole Board isn't convinced he's ready, and so he's remained locked up here in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan for the past 20 years.
But at some point, when a man or woman makes an effort to change and displays it, when does the punishment end and healing and return to the community begin?
Dennis Nowosielski is a Prince Albert City Councillor. He was one of Donald Hay's early case management officers, and he says he's seen few men change as much as Donald Hay has. He now speaks as his friend.
I see a man that has shown significant change, a man that's deserving of freedom to go on with his life.
Is it going to make her life any better by him staying there?
Leo and Lois Moran were Don Hay's neighbors, friends in Port Moody. They now live in Saskatoon, and they've stuck by their friend.
Lots of dinners at this very table.
Yes, yes.
This is the home in Saskatoon where Don Hay has spent the most time on passes. His hobby, needlework, hangs on their walls, and it speaks of the faith he's found since being introduced to the Christian Mennonite community.
Said to God, if you can use any part of the rest of my life, I've botched up the first 43 years plus. He said, if you can use me for the rest of my life, I give it to you. So.
Albert and Hilda Cornelson met Don Hay almost 20 years ago through a relative who was involved in a prison visitor program. They and Leola Epp were all cautious at first.
I believe he's strong enough to change if he wants to, and he definitely wants to.
They say I'm one of the family. And it's pretty special.
And now Don Hay wants to reach out and to apologize to his victim.
I'm just so very, very sorry it had to happen. Like words, there aren't words, I don't know words strong enough to express how bad I feel about what I did to her. Abby was a good kid. She never gave me a minute's trouble down there. Like even after the fact, she was just a beautiful child, and I don't know why it happened. I'm really, really sorry it happened. She a long time.
What did you think of his apology?
All he did was try and make excuses. I didn't hear an apology. I heard.
For two, Abby Drover has lived with the fear that one day Donald Hay would get out and hunt her down to kill her. Watching him now from the safety of her own home has eased that fear, but forgiveness will not come so easily.
21 years later, I am still in prison, a prison he created for me, and I don't see how he could expect me to forgive him.
And she has one final message for the National Parole Board as they consider Don Hay's future.
I want to be his last victim. I want people to realize the horrors he did. I hope that the National Parole Board will take my concerns seriously and will understand why I still feel the way I do.